I can't answer all of these questions, but I have someone sitting here with me today that can answer them for us. I'm delighted to have Dr. Reed Sheftall with us today. He's a heart surgeon, a plastic surgeon, an authority on the question of COVID-19. In fact, he's published 2 books on that subject. I'll touch on them now. We'll touch on them later. One of them is called Sanction, the COVID Murders, Volume 1. And the other is the COVID-19 Book of List, and it talks about the heroes and the villains in the COVID pandemic that took place. We'll talk about that in a moment. Dr. Sheftall, thank you so much for being here, taking time to join us in this, what I think is a very serious, preemptive conversation about what is happening, what has happened, and what we should believe. First of all, if you don't mind, take a moment introducing some perhaps have not heard our interviews before. So take a moment, give a little of your biographical and why people should listen, understand, and believe what you're saying. And then after you've done that, I want you to tell us a little bit about your 2 books.
Okay, thank you, Pastor Youngblood, for having me. And it's so great to be back with you after going through the treatment for my cancer. You're such a sight for sore eyes. You're such a great person. And it gives me inspiration and ambition to work hard from this point forward.
Amen. I'm thankful for that.
Thank you, sir.
And I'm delighted for the percentage of cure for what you've had, what you've gone through. By the way, it was not an easy way, but it was good weight loss, wasn't it?
Yeah, I lost 47 pounds. Can you see how skinny
I can see that.
Yeah, I look like a concentration camp survivor. Yeah. I look pretty bad. But, Pastor, I just want to give you a brief background sketch on myself. I was a physics major at MIT. I went to medical school. I taught physics for 1 year before medical school at the University of Southern California when I was 21 years old, younger than most of the students. And then I went to medical school, on to general surgery residency, and then plastic surgery residency, and finally at age 56, I needed someone to do the cardiac surgery in my charity, and there was no one there, so I went back and learned how to be a pediatric cardiac surgeon, which I do now.
Amen.
The reason I'm so interested in COVID is when I was in Cambodia at the time where I ran the charity, and I noticed that some of the claims that were being made early on were not true at all. And easy to prove that the authorities and the government, our own government, were lying about a lot of the science that underlied COVID-19. So I started writing essays, making videos, etc. And that culminated in the 2 books, Heroes and Villains, the COVID-19 Book of Lists, and the book that I'm publishing now called Sanction, the COVID Murders. I have 1 volume out, and there are going to be 6 volumes to that 2,000-page work.
Amen. Pretty definitive in that research and the study.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I've looked into it more than anybody. One interviewer, a very famous Dr. Thorpe, who's been very active in COVID, told me I was the most knowledgeable person in the United States on COVID. So
I believe him.
That was a nice compliment.
I believe him, absolutely. Well, Doctor, I'm looking at another one of the headlines says, World Health Organization Director issues a warning of the coming pandemic. New health organizations have been concerned by the world being enveloped by another pandemic after COVID-19 sucked globally in early 20s and following, killing millions of people and sparking economic, political upheaval around the world. The COVID-19 pandemic may now seem like a distant memory, this writer says, overtaken by conflict, geopolitical and economic disruptions. But the next pandemic will not wait until these things calm down. Would you decipher that for us?
Yes. First of all, I'd like to say that the WHO director, Tedros, was so wrong about COVID. I don't know why anyone would listen to him this time. Isn't that logical?
It's logical.
And he is wrong about everything. He said that the COVID-19 pandemic was caused by a novel coronavirus, SARS-CoV-2, which ended up not even existing, and I can prove it.
What are his medical credentials?
Oh, he is not a medical doctor. Can you believe the World Health Organization director is not a medical doctor?
Not a medical doctor. Most people do not know that.
Yeah, no, he's not a medical doctor. He is an epidemiologist type person, and he got his degrees from schools I'd never even heard of. He's from Ethiopia. So, what's going on with the World Health Organization? It's just become a body of corrupt support for the big pharma. It's
now,
really all it is.
Tell me if I'm right or wrong. I don't have the document before me, but recently I had a research document that said that under President Trump, we pulled out of the World Health Organization.
Yes, right.
Is that good or bad?
It's good. Why should we ask taxpayers to support an organization that lied to us about COVID, locked us down, destroyed the lives of millions of people, stole their life savings, many of whom got so depressed and despondent that they took their own lives?
Correct.
Remember,
in fact, that particular portion of it, if I can jump in, has been totally underreported.
Totally underreported.
In fact, the last time I read something on that, it was hundreds and hundreds that had taken their own lives.
Yeah, I saw an interview with an honest emergency room doctor who said, we're not getting any people with so-called COVID coming into the emergency room, but we're getting tons of suicide attempts from young people in here. People got very lonely. They weren't allowed to mix with other people. They weren't allowed to socialize. And that's very important, especially to a younger person who's not sure about his identity yet, and he needs his friends and so forth to support his good feeling about himself. Let's put it that way. And so the only two diseases causes of death that actually increased in 2020 were suicides and drug overdoses. Can you believe that? All the other causes of death decreased in 2020.
And yet, correct me if I'm wrong and explain this to our listeners. What's the difference? And we've talked about this before, but for perhaps a person that's not heard us before on this subject, what's the difference in what we have called COVID-19 and the change from deaths from emphysema for a year? I believe it's in 2020, 2021. Explain that differential in what we're talking about.
You mean how the deaths from influenza dropped to almost nothing?
Yes.
And the COVID deaths took their place. Yeah, that was just a rebranding of influenza.
So this is the reason you say very strongly that COVID-19 didn't exist.
Right. It's all COVID-19 was atypical pneumonia. Do you remember when the WHO director comes in front of all the cameras and said there are 14 cases of atypical pneumonia in the Huanan seafood wet market, and they're caused by a novel coronavirus? So the only thing that COVID-19 ever was atypical pneumonia. We just gave it a scary name, COVID-19, but all it was atypical pneumonia the whole time.
And yet we have today those...
And it was not caused by a novel coronavirus.
That's right. And yet we have those today. I was in Walmart just recently, and I was absolutely amazed to see two people out of all in the store wearing a real heavy mask, walking around as though they were zombified. And now I'm looking at a headline that says, "The Strange Religion of Vaccine Worship. Nearly half of all Democrat voters backed measures requiring the unvaccinated to live, at least temporarily, in detention facilities."
Yeah, and even go to prison for not getting their vaccine. I read the statistics on that. I was blown away. Something like 75% of Democrats and even like 18% of Republicans thought people should be punished with incarceration if they didn't take the vaccine.
Yes.
Isn't that insanity?
And yet what are we finding as far as the true statistical data, those that took the vaccine versus those that didn't?
Okay, well, let me
Which
tell
side
you,
fared better?
The people that did not take the vaccine fared much better statistically. And I know there's going to be people that quote the opposite, but I can prove that the vaccine was based, as all vaccines are, on the genome, as all vaccines are with the mod RNA platform. They're based on the messenger RNA of the virus, and that was obtained fraudulently. So the vaccine has nothing to do with the real world at all.
Explain that to our listeners.
Okay. When, very briefly, if you haven't taken biology before, there's a thing called DNA, and that gets transcribed into RNA. which gets translated into proteins, such as, say, the spike protein or many other proteins. And the idea of the vaccine was to take that messenger RNA, put it inside a lipid nanoparticle, but before that was done, they did a thing called N1-methyl pseudouridination. And that caused all kinds of problems that I can refer to later. So it wasn't messenger RNA that was put in the lipid nanoparticles, it was modified RNA.
Explain the difference to our listeners.
Well, modified RNA takes the uracil residues on messenger RNA and in the N1 position puts a methyl group on there. It's a chemical reaction that puts a methyl group on there. That reduces inflammation, which is a good thing, but it makes the RNA last on the order of years instead of days or hours even.
So let me jump in a moment. Is that the reason we're listening to what now is called long COVID?
No, that's a construct.
Okay.
I hate to say that,
go
but
ahead.
long COVID, if COVID doesn't exist, long COVID certainly doesn't exist. So that was a scam from the beginning. As a matter of fact, they interviewed a bunch of children who were said to have long COVID. Remember, this is more of an issue with children than anyone. And you know what the most common characteristic of the children with long COVID was?
What's that?
That their parents had told them they had long COVID.
Yeah.
So
they believe
there's
it
a
'cause
bunch
mom
of
and
woke
dad-
parents that were telling their kids they were going to be sick for a really long time from COVID, and they believed it. I mean, it's really sad because when you tell a person they're going to be a victim, they look for reasons to become a victim.
That's right.
And it's a terrible thing that human beings have fallen into. I'm talking about throughout life. You should not victimize or tell people they're a victim of something.
Absolutely.
Especially when they're young. They
Yes.
grow up their whole life thinking they're a victim.
Believing that. So also then,
But I can tell you any question you want about COVID. I'm sorry for going off on the
right. No,
tangent
that's
there.
good.
So that's the difference between mod RNA and messenger RNA, primarily, is that the longevity of messenger RNA is on the order of hours or maybe a few days, and the longevity of mod RNA, it doesn't get metabolized the same way. So it lasts years.
and so when you're saying that, you're speaking of the actual serum material that's in the vaccination.
Yes, it's inside the lipid nanoparticles. Remember the lipid
Right.
nanoparticles? They were put inside a lipid nanoparticle because cell walls are lipophilic, and that allows, like dissolves like, right? So it allows the lipid nanoparticle to meld with the cell wall and deliver its contents, the payload, which is mod RNA, to the cytoplasm, the inside of the cell. And then it finds ribosomes and gets translated into proteins. But since all of this theory has happened, we have done a lot of research now that was not done originally. It should have all been done beforehand, but it wasn't. They rushed this thing through,
Yes.
remember. And now we find out that mod RNA causes ribosomal frame shifting, which is something that's not going to be too familiar with most of your listeners, but I can very briefly
You do that.
explain it.
Yes.
It's when you take a codon, which is a 3 base pair segment, which maps to an anticodon on transfer RNA, which carries an amino acid. And remember, proteins are just long strings of amino acids.
Yes.
And when you do a ribosomal frame shifting, that means you take a 3-letter codon and you cut off the 3rd letter of it, and that goes with the first 2 letters of the next codon, and then the 3rd one of the next codon goes with the first 2 letters of the next codon, so that all the codons are wrong, so that all the amino acids are, you're mapping to the wrong amino acids, so you get what we call nonsense proteins. And those things can be very toxic.
And it remains in the system.
Yeah, sure it
Right.
does. And it causes all kinds of havoc we don't even know about yet. That's why so many people died of
Yes.
the vaccine.
Let's talk about that for a moment. As best I can understand and recall from my research on the subject, now we're being told, now it's being admitted, now there's being findings, now we are finding from some that have filed suit and gotten documents from the CDC and the NIH, etc., that males, 35 to 55 in particular, were susceptible to having major heart problems. Explain that. Why is it just in certain categories or certain genders that these things are taking place? What's the difference, and what should we know about that?
Okay, first of all, it was not males from 33 to 55. It was young males. It was males from about age
18 and up.
Yeah, that's right. 18 to 24 was the peak.
Yes.
But it went up into the early 30s and it went down into the early teens. But it's that 18 to 24-year-old age group that had a very high incidence of a thing we call myocarditis. That means inflammation of the heart muscle. And myocarditis can be mild and it can resolve, but the number one cause of heart transplants in the United States is myocarditis. So it can be a very serious thing, and it was a horrible complication of the vaccine that the CDC knew about and did not disclose in the thing you have to sign before surgery, your consent form.
Consent form.
It was not disclosed in there. And I've listened to fathers. I remember one father in particular from Canada that called up the clinic that gave his son the vaccine, and without disclosing that myocarditis was a possibility, because the son was like 18 years old, and this father was livid about it because his son ended up getting myocarditis.
I don't know of any human being,
and it wasn't even in the consent.
I don't know of any human being that I have known or that I know of that were given any disclosure as to the dangers of it.
That's right. It's all that the consent form warned people against was a sore arm, fever, that sort of thing, which comes with any injection in the arm. They didn't talk about any of the serious complications.
And how many of those complications do you say in your book that is there?
In Appendix 1 of my book, I have a list of over 1,300 very, very serious complications. Things like multiple sclerosis, Guillain-Barré syndrome, clotting in the ventricles of your heart. Can you imagine having a baseball-sized clot in your left ventricle? These things are listed in Appendix 1 of my book, Sanction the COVID Murders. And everybody should take a look at that and look at it. And that list was generated after only one dose of the Pfizer vaccine.
Yes.
Now, here's something that really should make everybody very upset. The FDA, and I don't know if you remember this, Pastor, but you probably do. The FDA tried to get all of the data hidden under lock and key for 75 years. Do you remember
that? There's so many documents it takes 75 years to release it all. Yeah, I remember that.
Well, a judge forced them to start releasing it, and that's when we found the list of all the complications after one dose of the Pfizer vaccine. Okay, now listen for a second. This is very important. It wasn't Pfizer that was trying to hide the data. It was our own FDA.
Yes.
They were trying to hide the data so that people wouldn't realize how corrupt they are, allowing that thing to get approved when they knew about all these horrible side effects from it.
Yes.
You see what I mean? Doesn't that make you really sick that our own FDA was trying to hide the data?
Let's put a little footnote there and ask another question in direct relationship to that. Why would they do that? What is the gain of them having done that?
Oh, the FDA?
FDA.
Because 75 years, all the people that are working at the FDA are going to be dead in 75 years, so they wouldn't have to face the music and explain how they could have possibly approved a vaccine that caused all these horrible, horrible side effects, including death.
So the question then comes to my mind, does that mean that Pfizer did no human studies before that was rolled out? And I understand based on research that Dr. Fauci and others lied and lied and lied for the first 2 years of President Trump's first presidency that kept this under wraps.
Pastor, you would not believe how much they skirted the issue of testing in humans. They used different formulations to test biodistribution, for example, to see where it would go in the body. They didn't use the actual commercial product. But the biggest thing they did, which they didn't test on humans, is they didn't even test the vaccine on humans. They switched from the PCR amplification method, from which they got the approval, to a E. coli and COVID method to multiply the mRNA, because you got to make billions of copies of this thing now.
Right.
So they used the organism E. coli, which is a bacterium, and inserted a plasmid into it and made copies of the plasmid by letting the E. coli multiply and over a weekend in a big aluminum vat. They just throw some E. coli in there, some sugar, and some plasmids, and the E. coli will take up the plasmid and multiply so that we would have billions and billions of copies of the mRNA. Then they pseudo-uridinated it, meaning they took the uracil residues and put a methyl group on at the N1 position, which caused all the problems. I mean, gosh, they didn't even test that formulation in people before they injected it into us.
But yet, for all of that which was promoted on television and through the Marxist media and through the Democratic Party, was that it's been found to be safe and efficacious.
I know it was not safe or effective, and I proved it in the summer of 2020 before the vaccines even came out.
Absolutely.
And I can explain how I proved that very easily.
Ladies and gentlemen, the telephone number is 904-831-0917, 904-831-0917. We're going to take the top of the hour news break right after the news. We'll be right back as we continue to face the issues.